Hello, and welcome to the stream. So I've just seen a message there from Kim in the chat room saying TikTok. We're not too late. Last minute setup and discussions about what we're going to be talking about tonight. So for regular viewers to the stream here, I'm still here as normal, but up in the corner there we have Andrew Nesbitt from
Hello.
GitHub open source fame. Let's put it simply. You've been involved in lots of different projects, and I think I know you best from the likes of libraries.io and octobox.io, both of which I have used in the past, and I'm an active user of Octobox today, which is great for managing all things GitHub notifications. So I guess maybe a quick hello from you, and then we can get started.
Hello. Thanks for having me on. This is fun. I've been on someone else's Twitch stream before. I have done some Twitch streaming myself in the past, and it'll be good to share some of this ingrained knowledge about the different hoops you have to jump through to get your app in the marketplace, and some of the different ways that you can approach it as well. Because I feel like it's a lot, but I didn't actually write any of it down in the process of doing it when I did it for Octobox.
So that's one of the reasons why I kind of started this whole streaming thing was, again, purely from we spoke about this before, but it's purely from a selfish point of view. I kind of felt that I could provide some information about some of the things, and it would also mean that I wouldn't necessarily need to write it down, so I could do it on stream as I was doing things and kind of provide that as a reference point for people to go back onto. But since then, it's kind of morphed into me getting other people on the stream to tell me how to do things, hence why I invited you onto the stream tonight to figure out some bits and pieces. So both Maurice and Kim in the chat room were involved in last Monday's stream, which was us talking about kind of how we would even start doing this, and this being, I want to enable GitHub Marketplace so that I can start to generate some revenue from this secret project that we've got going on here. So we started looking at some of the documentation, and we didn't get very far. So we were like, yeah, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. Part of me just kind of thought I was going to tick a box and immediately I was going to have access to everything that I needed. But I think there's a little bit more to it than that. And that's kind of where we thought you might be able to come on board. So I reached out via Twitter, and you were happy to jump on board. So I really appreciate you coming on the stream. So,
no worries.
As a quick review, we being myself and Matthias have this secret project, and this secret project is a ASP.NET MVC application, which is the front end. So I'll go ahead and open these things up. So I've now got a ASP.NET MVC website that is providing the user interface for the service that we're providing. And we also have a API that is a set of Azure functions that provide access to some persisted database, which goes into Azure table storage. Now, what we did on Friday's stream, so I do a lunchtime stream on a Friday as well, Andrew, which is me basically just getting away from work for a little bit and kind of getting some stuff that I want done. So on a Friday lunchtime, or this last Friday lunchtime, we did some tidy up of the code. So the tidy up was we had projects split all over the place, and we wanted to reconcile some of that. So we created this new project, imaginally called Common. So we've got a Common project now, and that Common project holds the minute simply the shared models between the two projects. So we've got some classes that are shared between the two projects, and those are now referenced via a NuGet package into the two other projects. So assuming that all of this is still working, so we should probably have this running just in case we get to a point where things are running. So if I run this up just to let you see what we've got, and then we can talk about some specifics of the GitHub Marketplace. Let's just make sure that this is all running. And Maurice is saying, I just wanted to say never assume things. You're probably right, Maurice. Absolutely. I mean, I've left this machine by itself for a week and not touched it. So that can only mean it's going to break, right? I mean, that's just the way my development goes sometimes. Oh, there we go. I'm going to go with...
Oh, hey, Kenneth.
He's a big fan of Octobox. I'm a huge fan of Octobox as well. I am a daily user of Octobox. It's great at what it does.
I'm also a big fan of Kenneth. He did an amazing talk at FOSDEM, not this year, but last year, when I ran a package manager's room for the day. Was a hilarious talk that he did.
So, I mean...
He works on the Easy Build package manager, I believe.
I've heard of that one. I've not used it, but I could say I've heard of it. So that's our...
Specific computing, those kind of things.
Yeah. So that's our API up and running. So if we go over here and look just to check to see that this is working. So this is our ASP.NET MVC site going to spin up, and what we have in the background is, let's bring this up. If it's going to play ball, if we go to the Azure Table Storage Emulator or Explorer, come on Windows, Storage Explorer, that's what I want. So where GitHub starts to come into this, and kind of the reason that we, or rather I invited you onto the stream, was we use... He's saying that we're making Andrew blush. He knows jack shit about development on Windows, so this could be interesting. Well, hopefully. I mean, that's most of my day, that sort of attitude, I'll be honest. But I muddle through. So what we've got here is, I'm not an HTML, CSS guru by any stretch of the imagination. So what you're seeing here is the default template straight out of Visual Studio. But what we have done is we have enabled the mechanism to log into this website via GitHub. So I created an Oauth app in GitHub, and I've taken the client secret and the client ID and the client secret, put them into my application, and I can now click on the GitHub button, and I can log in as an authenticated GitHub user. So Maurice in the chat room is asking a question.
Hello, Bill.
So that's the other thing. So I've logged into GitHub as me, but I gave it the username, the final username that this application wants. I just give it something random, so I knew that it was that one, if you see what I mean. So with that logged in, this website now lights up in the sense that we have access to this subscriptions field that wasn't there before. So this subscriptions tab is the thing that we want to put behind a paywall to an extent. So we have Bobby drop tables because in one of the streams, someone wanted to make sure that the Azure table storage wasn't susceptible to SQL injection, so we started putting random values into the field, trying to break it. But this is essentially the user table at the minute that we want to be able to be editable and for people to create a new one. But we also want to only allow, say, 3 to be created in the free tier. So when you use this application for free, you get 3 of these things, and then after that, we want to be able to say, you need to give us money. And that's where I think the GitHub Marketplace is going to come into play. So with your experience from Octobox and how you were able to set that up, because I mean, I'm a happily paying, subscribed, fully signed up member of Octobox, and I give you money through Open Collective. Now that's done differently to what I'm hoping that we can do here, but I believe you can pay for Octobox in 2 ways. You can pay for it through Open Collective or through the GitHub Marketplace. Is that correct?
Indeed.
Yep.
And we actually end up being the same underlying store for the purchases in Postgres, whether it comes from GitHub or it comes from Open Collective. Right. So once the data is in, the rest of the application is none the wiser where you paid it from, as long as you paid it.
Gotcha. So,
but for all intents and purposes here, it's going to be the same kind of all the same logic. It just doesn't have the path that you came in through Open Collective.
Correct.
In theory, you could do a similar thing with, say, a Stripe payment or even an invoice payment if you are looking for like the enterprise customers that want to send you a check in the post, where you manually do that. I guess the main thing you're leaning on GitHub for is the authentication as well, but potentially you could have different authentications at the same time.
So Kim's saying it's cash only for the service as well. So if you buy me a beer,
I'd quite like to play with Bitcoin.
So of course that's another revenue stream. But I mean, so the thought process behind GitHub Marketplace and what it's offering was solely because, I mean, we're already doing GitHub for the authentication, so it kind of, in my mind, it made sense to kind of get or handle things in one place. But obviously, if we wanted to expand this, I mean, I hadn't even considered the whole concept of a company wanting to invoice us. Hadn't even occurred to me that might be an option. So, but that's so. And to recap what we kind of spoke about just before the stream, what we're aiming for here is that minimal viable product. We're just trying to have something that will allow us to kind of test the water a little bit, to be able to have the service up and running, to allow people to subscribe to it, and if they choose to give us money, then we have a mechanism to get there. Now, that might not be they might not have all the ways that they want to pay us, but our thought process is the service that we're offering is it's kind of intended for developers to use, so we kind of expect them to already be familiar with GitHub, to already be familiar with the kind of overall concept of the GitHub Marketplace, and not be a stranger to potentially paying for services through that. So that's kind of the thought process that we've had, and but it does bring up some conversation.
That's pretty reasonable.
Other ways of doing it as well. But for you, Kim, on the chat room, I think you've been one of the people that have been involved in this from the start. So you'll probably get access to this service for free when we. That's the other thing that's happening on this stream, Andrew, as we've been building this up. I make a ton of mistakes, and my coding, especially when I'm trying to talk whilst coding and typing at the same time, that doesn't always work very well. So Kim and Maurice here in the chat room are very good at helping me point out my errors and make things work. So it's great. I mean, and like I said, that harks back to the whole
rubber ducking.
Pretty much, it really is. I mean, it's. I mean, you said you've done streaming as well. It's like you can be thinking about something and you have a complete mind blank because you're trying to talk about things and code at the same time. So both Kim and Maurice have been very helpful in that respect to get things working. So I always appreciate them joining the stream. You're missing a beer pay account. Maybe one day. Okay, so where do we start, Andrew? What do I need in order to start this process?
So I made some notes. I racked my minds this morning going like, I have all of the code in Octobox, so I should be able to recreate this. What are the different things to think about? And so one of the first decisions that I think is helpful to make, and you've kind of already made it, but you might want to change your mind, is if you want to stick with using an Oauth app or switch to a GitHub app. It gets kind of confusing from a naming perspective, but you have a GitHub Oauth app or a GitHub app, which does Oauth,
right?
but is a separate entity, and those different things give you different abilities when it comes to working with the GitHub API. But what you said to me earlier was that really we're using this just for authentication and for basically like the payment processor, rather than actually hooking in, say, like you're not going to be adding or reading or writing data to repositories or managing teams or issues or sending pull requests or things like that. So you're not going to be needing to, the users aren't going to have to grant your application any access to any of their data other than the purchases they've made and they're proving that they are that user.
Correct.
So I don't think you'll need to switch from an Oauth app to a GitHub app. As admiring worm, I don't know. Kim, there we go. I'll get names eventually. That you might want to do that in the future.
So that was going to be my immediate question.
It might be painful to switch once you're in the marketplace, but switching before you've gone live is actually quite easy because you log in to GitHub using Oauth, whether or not it's a GitHub app or an Oauth app to prove out who you are. It's the same interface. It's just a different token.
Okay. So, if you don't mind me asking, did you not have something recently where you had to send out requests to all your Octobox users because you needed an additional set of? You had to change the scope. Was that what happened? So
that is a feature of the GitHub app setup as opposed to GitHub Oauth. With GitHub Apps, it has a not much, but there's a lot more options when it comes to choosing the permissions that you want to let your users give to you, give to the app. And what we added a feature to Octobox to allow you to comment on a issue or a pull request. And so we needed to ask for the ability to write to issues and to write to pull requests, which we didn't have when we first launched it. And if in the settings page of GitHub, when you're editing your GitHub app, if you change those permissions, it shows you a little kind of red box that's like, are you aware this will email everyone? And of course, we changed the permission to ask for write on issues, and that emailed everyone. And we realized that despite the API is called like issues API for writing comments on pull request in the documentation, actually you also need the ability to write to a pull request to leave a comment on a pull request using the issues API. Gotcha. So we had to ask for the second permission, which sent out a second load of emails because the GitHub documentation was poor. I don't think we'll need to worry about that yet, but if you wanted to set up in a way that allowed you to do all of the interesting things that a GitHub app lets you do in the future, it's probably better to switch early rather than late. The only time that you wouldn't want to switch, or that you might need to do a bit of both, which is what Octobox has to do, and I wish no one had to do it. But if you want to have access to the notifications API on GitHub, GitHub apps don't have the scope. They can't ask for notification access, which means that you need, if you want a GitHub app to be able to work with users' notifications, you need to get the user to log into a traditional OAuth GitHub app, GitHub OAuth app, and to have the new style GitHub app installed at the same time, because then your application becomes the join of the two data sources, and which is why if you've ever tried to install Octobox on a set of private repositories, you've had to log in twice. It's really painful, but there's no way around it until GitHub adds the notifications API to GitHub apps, and they haven't done it for 2 years, and there's no word they're going to do it anytime soon. But again, I don't think you're going to be doing that. It could possibly be my internet. It's not the best. I am out in rural Somerset. If you miss anything, then I'm happy to repeat it.
So so because of my setup, I've kind of asked Andrew to we might drop the Zoom session if we find we don't need it. But so effectively, what we've got in terms of my setup is we have an open Skype connection so that I can talk to Andrew and make him available on my OBS. We've then got Twitch is going out, or OBS is going out from my machine, so that's not impacting Andrew. But we've also got an open Zoom session so that I can show Andrew what I'm showing to the stream before it actually goes out, and we haven't to. Andrew doesn't have to wait for the 15-20 seconds latency to come through on the Twitch stream. So if it's going to be a problem, we can maybe drop the Zoom session. But the thought process there was to allow Andrew to see what I'm seeing as it's going out, so that he can kind of direct me to push buttons and make it clear what's going on.
I guess I can always jump back into the Zoom session if necessary.
True. Because I mean, I can leave it open at my side, so you can always join again if and when required. So we could try that out and see if it's going to improve the connection.
Okay, yeah. Let me try dropping off this for now then. I've still got the little Twitch chat pop up. Right. Then I can hit that Zoom share link again if I need to.
So
you still hear me and everything?
I can still hear you, so let's just have a quick check. So Maurice or Kim, are you still able to hear Andrew okay? Let's wait for the latency to kick in. Seems a bit better. Okay, so
seems a bit better.
So let's give it a try, and then we might have to work with if I'm showing something on the screen, if you've got Twitch open. I don't know if you've got the Twitch stream open muted, but we can.
No.
Well,
I figured that would also hurt
your balance too. So let's go through the power of the description, and I'll explain to you what I've got on the screen, and we can work from there. So to recap where we were. So if I understood you correctly, let me just paraphrase into my way of thinking about things. So there's two mechanisms in GitHub. There's the Oauth app and there's the GitHub app. Because for reasons, there's a difference between the two, and depending on what exactly we're trying to do, we might need both in the case of Octobox. For what we're doing right now, for what I've described, we might be able to get away with an Oauth app, but in the future, we might need it to be a GitHub app. So the question that kind of remains is, do we start with a GitHub app on the thought process that we might need it, or do we just go with an Oauth app? So my kind of initial question would be, well, is there any additional overhead to having a GitHub app as opposed to an Oauth app, or is it just a different connection point that, do I have to do something different in order to do authentication with a GitHub app, or can I still do authentication with a GitHub app, or do I still need the Oauth app to do the authentication and then the GitHub app to do the marketplace stuff?
So you don't need, if you're using the GitHub app, you can use that for authentication with the Oauth endpoint. It's exactly the same endpoint. It's just use the token and like the ID and the secret or whatever it's called for logging in, and then you need a set of tokens to talk to the GitHub API. The thing. So I've only been through this process with the GitHub app. There's also a limit when you want to actually try and publish on the marketplace, that if it's a OAuth, it says it in the documentation. I try and dig out the link, but there's so many links. Basically, for an OAuth app, you need 200 users before they'll accept you into the marketplace. And for a GitHub app, you need 100 installations. So the bar is lower, yet listed on the marketplace as a GitHub app than as an OAuth app.
So the distinction. So let me understand the distinction there. So in terms of becoming listed on the marketplace, that doesn't stop me from using the functionality of the marketplace. It just means that people wouldn't be able to search for me on the marketplace from GitHub. Is that correct?
I believe they also wouldn't be able to pay.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I believe. I mean, we can have a poke around in the docs.
Yeah.
there is a page which I think I did put in the Zoom chat before. I will put it in the Sky chat.
I can bring up the ones that we had open. So the ones that we had open were, there was a GitHub Marketplace REST API endpoints, and there was a available endpoints link that you sent. And the other one,
requirements for listing an app on the marketplace is the one that is the, if you want to be able to integrate billing workflows, as in to offer a paid service through the GitHub Marketplace, then there's a number of things you have to do before, and that includes having either a number of installations or a number of users, and a number of other things, and going through a security check. So it's not like you can just self-service all the way into being a paid integration. Right. You can basically, whilst your app is in, so if you have the Oauth app or the GitHub app, it can be public, but it won't have like the, I don't know what they call it, but essentially like the privileges for having any of the marketplace integration. So you won't get webhooks about payments, and you won't be able to write to the endpoints to say like this user has paid or not, because that just won't be a thing until they have basically greenlit, thumbs up your
interesting
thing. But you can, this was a recent thing, if you have a free app, you can be listed on the marketplace as a unverified app. You see this a lot with GitHub Actions on the, if you look at the marketplace, you'll see the question mark next to them, and some that will say they're verified. That basically means they've been through the process. But I don't believe you'd be able to charge money until you have been verified and approved for to be able to put a restriction in place that can be lifted by signing up on GitHub.
I think that makes sense. So,
but you can test before you get approved, you can test those marketplace endpoints. They have some fake endpoints for checking that your application will be able to handle it.
Gotcha. Okay, I think I'm okay with that. So I mean, it's I think I'm okay with that. So I mean, so in terms of how we're doing, so let's just say that the number is 200. If I had 200 registered users who'd gone through the Oauth app, that would be my evidence, if you like, that I had 200 users. Is that correct?
Yeah, they would know, because you create that Oauth app on GitHub.com, and they can see the count of the people that have registered with it.
So, and that
doesn't mean that they're still using it.
No,
it's entirely just I've been 200 people have been
absolutely through the okay. So that's something to bear in mind then. Okay, so no, I'm okay with that. I think so. So you said that potentially it was like 100 for a GitHub app, but that was installations of the app. But as we spoke about before, I don't think we're going to need people to install an app. We really just want the authentication and then the access to the marketplace or for the billing purposes. So from that point of view,
so in that case, you might think an Oauth app would make more sense, because no one is going to want to do something that they don't need to. You could prompt them to do it, but they'd be like, wait, this doesn't ask any permissions, and they don't do anything.
Using Octobox as an example, it totally makes sense that I would want to install Octobox on my personal GitHub account so I can get the notifications coming through from that. And then it also makes perfect sense that I would want to install the Octobox app on an organization that I want to enable the notifications to come through from that organization. So Kim's saying cannot see any paid unverified apps available, nor with any free trial. So that kind of ties into what you said as well. So I think I've kind of semi-convinced myself that the Oauth app that we have and that we've been using is the right way to go, I think.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that makes sense.
So what do I what
and
what
the APIs, basically the marketplace APIs, are then pretty much the same,
okay.
whether you're an app or an Oauth app.
Okay.
This language is slightly confusing.
Yeah.
I'm just having a look in the database schema for Octobox to check that there's no app specific language in any of the database fields related to the purchase, and it doesn't look like it. So this might be a good time to talk about the kind of data that you get.
Okay.
Before we look at the complete flow, if we imagine, so you're basically, once it's all hooked up and going, the main thing that's going to happen is that when a user makes a purchase, and well, let's say a free account is also a purchase, but probably just logging in with Oauth would be the equivalent free. You wouldn't need any extra stuff. And so you can kind of say, like, as long as they exist in my database, then they are on a free plan, unless we find otherwise. So you've basically got two models, a subscription plan and a subscription purchase. So when someone makes a purchase, they are purchasing one plan for your Oauth or your GitHub app. And the plan is the thing that decides how much they're paying, either monthly or yearly, if they have the possibility for a free trial. And then the pricing model, there's a number of different models for how you want to charge. I forget what they are. They're things like paying for private things versus for public things, or paying per seat. Vendors have authenticated this for a given organization, and you can pay for like, or you can have like an arbitrary number of things. So you're taking with rate limit, and you want to bill against that rate limit usage through your through the GitHub Marketplace. They basically will say, like, you tell us how much usage you're getting, and we'll bill them for that usage of some arbitrary number. And those things are all covered in different pricing. We will pick one, and then the plan that's recorded on GitHub, when you receive webhook events that say someone signed up for this plan, or someone upgraded to this plan, or someone canceled the pricing model that they're on, so that you can then work out, like, for your use case, it should be a fairly easy one, I think. And then you can even have plans that have various kind of unit levels, we say. So, like you said, you might have a maximum of 3 on the plan, and then you might say you have a medium plan that goes to 10, and then you might have like the supreme plan that goes. Then you'd make plans for each one of those things, and you could use either the name of the plan or the thing that they call a unit name as the, and we can look at the documentation for that later. But basically, you're going to have a selection of plans that you are going to make from within the GitHub user interface, the marketplace user, very much like the way you configure a GitHub Oauth app by basically filling out a form and putting some details and adding some shots and things. And then you those plans show up as the options for a user when they're going to purchase, or from the GitHub app style, install this GitHub app. And then you get told about every purchase that a user makes. I'm guessing that a plan can be changed, but not a unit name. So we can get into what can be changed and what can't be changed. But in general, GitHub really don't like you changing anything once something has been published. The kind of the flow there is that you would archive or hide a plan once and make a new one with the updated details. It basically doesn't let you make much of a change to anything. And so you'd grandfather people onto the old plan with a different name, even if the names were this, like, you change one character, and there's to be hard restrictions in the UI to basically say, no, make a new plan and then hide the old plan, so that all the previous users are still being billed on the old plan. You can never have anything deleted, basically, from the GitHub Marketplace. Then you're getting told about the user's purchases, and that purchase has all the details about the billing. When does that last to? Is it until the end of the month? Is it until the end of the year? How are they a free trial with that purchase? So if enabled a plan to have a free trial, they'll have maybe 10 days or 2 weeks of free trial, and you'll get told this is the date where their free trial will end, as well as a Boolean to say they're currently on a free trial. And that will be the kind of the key that will be linked to a particular user or an organization. So your purchase will be like, user has purchased plan X, and you can join a cross subscription table to work out, does the user have the correct plan to be able to perform this action, say to make their fourth thing. Then the logic basically says there needs to be a valid subscription purchase for a plan that lets me go above 4 for that kind of thing.
It does. So the part that I think I was missing when I first started reading about this last week was what you said there was that everything was driven by a webhook. So let's imagine the scenario that Kim in the chat room decides he wants to give us some money. So he's going to go to the GitHub Marketplace eventually, where we have a listed Oauth application. He's going to select the highest plan because he's going to want to give us lots of money. And what's going to happen at that point is that when he says, go gadget and buy it, we're going to get a webhook from GitHub that says, Kim has just subscribed at this level and it runs to this date. So however we set up the plan, I then have to have something in my application that is receiving that webhook. So I'm going to need to capture that data in that webhook, and I'm going to need to store that somewhere in my table, in my database. And then when Kim comes along and actually logs into my application, I'll be able to look up the webhook data that I've stored that says Kim has an active subscription at this plan, and he's now allowed to make a fourth subscription, as we spoke about, to make things happen. Now, I'm assuming then that if that plan were to be cancelled or terminated from GitHub, we'd also get another webhook to come in that says Kim's no longer a paying customer. So I then need to take that webhook data and update my persisted information about the current subscription level. Does that pretty much sum it up? Because
yes,
I think originally
So I pasted a link in the Twitch chat for perk docs. It basically is going to be, there's one one webhook, I guess, like it's for all marketplace purchases, and that'll have a different actor for the different things that it could represent, including the plan and the the details of the purchase. This does not. So there's a gotcha to bear in mind. There's no webhook for a change to a plan, which, as we said before, you can't read plans very much, but you can archive them away. And so if there's a new plan that's made, your application won't get told that someone went into the GitHub Marketplace admin screen and made a new plan. The first time you'll hear about it is when it comes through on that webhook. But there is a REST API that you can pull to say what a plan right now, which is something that we have to do with. We basically set it up with Octobox to ensure that if either myself or Ben change the plans at any point, we don't have to remember to go back and run a task to plans manually. We didn't want that, the ability to forget that.
Gotcha. Because I think originally...
So you're basically driving everything...
Sorry, all I was going to say was originally when I kind of started thinking about this, I sort of thought that on or after authenticating the user to my application, I would then go to GitHub and say, has this person got a plan? But it's almost like the complete reciprocal of that. It's I will have all of that data local in my application. So once the user authenticates, I can look at my own table and say, okay, this user has got a plan and he can do those, or he or she can do all those things. So yeah, it's almost like the polar opposite of how I expected it to work. And that's not a bad thing, but... So
you definitely could do it that way round, but every time that you went to make any action, you'd have to be like, should I double check with GitHub that user had cancelled their plan? Which some projects actually do that with the permissions to... Does this user still have the permission to read this repository's issues, for example? And it's very chatty over the API, and you end up hitting rate limits and things that you really don't want to. So there's even rate limits on the marketplace REST APIs, even though there's only a very small handful of people that are hitting them. But yeah, so you what you probably want to set up, what they recommend somewhere in the documentation, is having the ability to do things in both ways. So you can have the primary mechanism is your webhooks, because they will push to you when anything happens, as within a second of it happening. You'll get a HTTP request with a blob. Pretty much everything that, in the case of marketplace stuff, everything you would need to store data in your database to say this user is enough to be able to do some stuff, or no longer has a valid subscription. Then you also want to be able to say, can I just double check? Can I go and fetch all the users that are on this plan, or can I go fetch all the plans?
So you can do a reconciliation effectively. So
there's a few different...
I could run a reconciliation event that says, get me all the people on this plan and make sure that my local database or my local table is up to date. Because that was going to be my next question. So what happens if a webhook from GitHub fails? So let's walk through the process again. So Kim has registered and he has paid, clicked the button and said, here's all my money, I want this plan. What happens if that webhook doesn't get delivered for some reason? Or do we have to send a response back once?
So GitHub will know if the webhook has not been successfully delivered, then your application didn't give a 200 or 2 request. But they won't. I don't believe they act on that, other than showing you in the marketplace some failed webhooks. But so the approach that I took is that when a user goes through the Oauth process, as part of that, it does
I see what you're saying.
a double check of a number of things that you probably don't need to worry about. Things like, what are all the organizations that this user has, basically like a number of permission-y related things, because often if the user does have trouble and your say your webhooks are out of date for some reason, you missed one, then they're likely going to try and log in and log out again as their first port of call to fix it. And so having that as a catch of oh, there you go. The other thing you do is, and I think we have this in Octobox, is in the settings page on the marketplace, you have to have an interface that shows the current plan that the user is on. With the ability to, if there is an upgrade available, to be able to hit the button to upgrade.
Gotcha.
And you can have like a refresh button there, but it's not particularly nice. So I prefer to have something. So we have a regular rake task, rake being like Ruby make for our Rails app. It's just running a one-off Ruby script that boots the Rails application I want to say it's every 10 minutes. And we basically go and check we check the plans, and we check the users that are on those plans, because we only have 2 or 3 plans, just to make sure. And that's not doing a full kind of reconciliation. It's just doing like a double check. And then if something is amiss, then we will, if there's a user that looks like they should have something, but we don't have a record for it, then we'll fire off something more in depth to go and load more stuff from the API. You should be able to get everything that you would get from Webhook from the REST API, but ideally you'd only be double checking, confirming that everything was the same.
Okay, well, no, I like that. So in that scenario where, as I described, so Kim is there, he's logged into GitHub, he buys a plan through the marketplace, and something goes wrong with the webhook going to my application. Kim, as a first port of call, could even just attempt to log into my application, and the first thing that we would do would be, okay, GitHub, Kim's just signed in, what plans is he activated on? If we don't have that in our local database, that's our opportunity to add that into our local database, and then from that point forward, everything's in sync. And then what we could do on a longer term basis is do a full reconciliation of all the plans for everyone across the application, and making sure that they're all still in sync. Okay.
At least until you're ready.
Yeah.
But that's a good problem, because you probably got paying customers.
So okay, no, that makes sense to me. Okay, so I'm going to need from
one thing to bear in mind as well is that just because you got, so some of the webhooks will say like there is an effective date of this webhook, and that might not be right now. It might be like a user has cancelled their plan, but they paid till the end of the month. And so you do have to get a little bit of date time stuff in your application, but generally you can just rely on the fields that come through and scope things to be like that this date must be in the future, like whenever you query for things like that.
So obvious question first, all date times coming through in webhooks are UTC, or they're in GitHub headquarters time, or
I'm fairly sure they're in UTC. We can have a look on the link that I placed in the Twitch before. Effective date string bear, which lists as it has the time zone information. The examples it's 0, but it's a some number n valid date time like this. I paste in the chat. So
there we go.
Whatever everything to pass your date time probably will be able to handle
Absolutely. That should be fine.
If you're using the Octo Kit library from GitHub, then I'm pretty sure it will automatically turn that into a date time for you.
Okay, so all of this is making sense to me so far. So from a technical point of view, I'm going to need a new endpoint on my API, and that I'm assuming is going to be a publicly routable, or rather, I'm assuming that what it will have to be is a publicly routable address that I can give to GitHub through the Oauth app settings, that when a webhook would come from the marketplace, it knows where to send that in order for my application to do what it needs to do to do that.
Yes.
Okay, so that makes sense. So
and that will be, if you ever want to do anything else with, say, like listening for issues or anything around organizations and teams, then you will get any other webhooks will probably want to come down that same endpoint, because a GitHub app has one webhook URL. You don't have many of them. You have one that receives many different kinds of events.
So based on the structure of, so I'm looking at one of these actions. So the action of this webhook is purchase. So I would need to trigger off the action of that webhook to then, within that endpoint, then
as well as
to where it needs to be.
As well as looking at the header x-github-event. The action is not quite enough to be able to discern what kind of webhook payload it is. You need to look at the header as well.
Okay, fine. Okay.
I'll paste another link to Twitch for more details about the webhooks. So, as you said, it's open because you need to be able to receive stuff. How do you know someone didn't just watch your Twitch stream? The URL is I can just post in something that says I am this.
Absolutely.
So you could do a few different things. One thing to do would be to then go like, oh, I got a webhook. I will use that as a hint, but I'll go load all the data from the REST API.
I see.
And not trust anything that came through.
Because we've got some dodgy people on this stream that might want to try and do things like that. I'll mention no names, but
if they've already been Bobby tablesing different things, then you could imagine.
That's the kind of level we're at on this stream. So there's definitely those thought processes on the stream. So that's a good point, actually. So it could be, I see what you're saying. So I got an incoming webhook, but it's the old adage of rubbish in, rubbish out. So you need to verify that data going in is actually correct, and that's an opportunity to call the REST API based on that trigger to then do stuff with it. Okay, I see what that's saying.
That's one approach. You could, or what you can do is you can set a secret within the the admin, some arbitrary and GitHub will basically sign the body of the webhook that it's sending to you, but in the header a x-hub-signature header, which is a SHA-1 of the body, so that you can then confirm. You keep a private copy of the secret in your application as well, and you can confirm that the body, when you SHA-1 it, matches the
what is essentially the shared secret between both ends. Okay, that makes sense. I like that one. one. Okay, and that's what Maurice is hinting at.
That's what we do with Octobox. Okay. I could show you the code, but it's in Ruby, and it might not be very useful to you. I think it should be easy enough to find. The other thing you can do, I believe, and it's a little bit brittle, is that GitHub only uses a certain IP addresses to send its webhooks.
I see. Okay, you could limit
you could
it based on the
actually
incoming header of the request as well.
Where it came from. But I think it's probably it's also the fastest way to be able to get all of the data came in, I double checked it,
Yeah.
and then use that without having to make more HTTP requests.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I can see how that would.
What we do is we put all of the webhooks into a queue, work through them, because the application might be overloaded, or in our case, we do quite a lot of work at some points when, say, like someone installs the app on a very large
Of course,
GitHub org. Suddenly there's loads of data and there's things to do, and we didn't want the webhooks receiver to be able to get to the point where it's ever saying like, I can't handle any incoming webhooks. With libraries.io, we actually ran the webhooks endpoint as a separate app on a subdomain, which meant that we could take the main application down, do maintenance without stopping the incoming webhooks. And then the webhook app basically plugged straight into the queue and wrote straight to the queue. It was a little bit like, I didn't like exposing the innards of the queue to a separate application, but you could run 2 instances of the application if you wanted, one you only use those kind of things. In this case, because you're only dealing with marketplace transactions, at least for now, I think you'd be all right to just have it like, oh well, it's just a public endpoint on the API, and then if we're down, we didn't hear about something, but when the user logged in, once we were back up, then we double checked their details against the API. So
just to speak to that slightly, so the way that Matthias has set up some of the back end of the service, so Matthias is an Azure MVP. He loves all things Azure. So the way that we're processing the stuff, we'll still call it the stuff, that's coming through for this service. He's got lots of message queues in play at the minute. So he has incoming information goes into a queue. It's then picked up by one function, and stuff is applied to it. It then drops it into another queue to then process by another function. So he's already kind of got that architecture set up in terms of processing that data. So he'll probably want to do something similar with what you've just described in terms of, and that makes perfect sense as well, obviously, because less chance of missing something or getting overloaded is you accept the request, you send the 200, you put it on a queue, and then you process it at a later date or a later time. That makes sense. I can see how that would work. And to speak to what Maurice is talking about in the chat room, so I have done a small amount of Ruby coding. I've done enough Ruby coding to know that I don't necessarily want to do it on a daily basis, but I've done a couple of pull requests into the Chef code base, and Chef is written in Ruby. So I had a little bit of a foray into doing some PRs there, but that was literally copying what was done before for something else and then changing it to the new thing that I needed it to be. So it wasn't really, I wouldn't class it as programming. It was copy and pasting and editing. So that's my extent of.
I wrote something. I was like, oh, I successfully got Rust code working, like by copying someone else's.
Because it was this was for chocolatey stuff, but I wanted to add in a feature to Chef for chocolatey, and they already had the ability to do the chocolatey config command, but I wanted to be able to do the chocolatey feature command. So to an extent, it was literally changing config to feature in lots of places, and it started working magically. So it was good fun. That's very true, Maurice. So it's programming is knowing what and how to copy paste, right? That's a lot to that. Yeah, it's knowing which Stack Overflow question to go to and which one to use, and absolutely. So, Google.
How good can Google for the thing?
So
cool. Okay, so to try and sum it up, you've got webhooks and the equivalent REST API to be able to work out if a user has the correct purchase or just a plan. and then that's your application. Then can use that 2 bits of details to decide the business logic, and GitHub isn't going to do that work for you. So you're going to have complete freedom. It also means that you can make a private interface or a private table in your application that allows you to go like, oh, I know that this person signed up for a free trial, but I'm going to put a flag on that table that says continue on that free trial for more. Like, other than keeping your data in sync with the data that's on GitHub, you can do whatever you like with what it says, but the users are, if they're paying, they're going to expect to get what you said you would deliver. And during the marketplace review to get listed, they will try and sign up, and they will see what happens as a result of it. So you're like, but in your case, it's going to be really simple of saying like, oh, I've signed up and now I can do the thing. Where I couldn't do it before, or I had a limit of 3, for example.
So I'm just looking at the schema that you pointed to as well. So in terms of the, that's fine. The Zoom.
So the only thing in there that is specific is the OC_transaction. That's basically the thing that we pin for our Open Collective purchases. Everything else basically maps to the data that comes through from the GitHub API. I'm not sure if they have created that and updated that. That's basically Rails will automatically fill in those fields using its ORM if stuff is changing. There might be some things that we don't save because we didn't care about them. But save all of the things that were relevant for us to be able to
the actions that you want
do
to
all of the basic functionality.
That makes sense. So I can see, I can picture how all that's going to work, I think.
So
that's a good start.
Do you have, let's talk about orgs for a minute. So you're imagining currently only users can log in because it's an Oauth. Because in Oauth app, the only things that can interact with your GitHub integration are humans, human users. You can't pretend to be the Microsoft org and app. You can install the GitHub app on the Microsoft organization. Your GitHub app can do stuff as the GitHub app on the Microsoft repos potentially. But in your case, that's not something that can happen. So that keeps things a little bit simple. But people can still purchase things through the marketplace as an org if you set up that as an option. So you don't have to set it up as an option, I believe. It says that again. Documentation has many choices. There's a page called GitHub Marketplace Transactions that has that's not the right one. Listing on GitHub Marketplace. Blah blah blah. Setting up GitHub Marketplace pricing plans. Here we go. I'll place the link in the Twitch chat. That gives you some stuff.
Cool.
And I honestly can't remember if that lets you hook it. I'll tell you what I will do. I will log in to the marketplace settings and have a look, because it's much easier than the documentation.
So while you're doing that, I'll just say a quick hello to Matthias. So Dev Lead has just joined the chat room as well. So we can stop talking about him now and saying all those bad things. And he's now in the chat room. And it's just notified me that he's a 4-month subscriber to the Twitch channel here. So I appreciate your continued subscription, Matthias. And Maurice is a 3-month subscriber, seemingly. So thank you very much for that. So...
maybe.
Okay.
I have Twitch Prime,
If
so
you
maybe
have,
I can
if
give
you have a
free.
Twitch,
I'm not sure.
if you have a Amazon Prime, you have the ability to give a free or your free subscription to myself as well. Yes.
Oh,
You might have given it.
that is not available until the 21st of August. But I will follow you. I'll give you a follow. There you
go. So at Catch.
Okay, so I've got the plan draft page up here, and it basically you can choose. Do you want this to be available for personal and organizations, just personal, or just organization?
Interesting.
So to keep things simple, you might make it for only personal accounts. That basically means that each person is paying for their own thing. It sounds like what you'd end up doing in this case is, even if, say, you wanted to sign up and use this service that you've built for my organization, I could sign up as me and I could pay as me, and then I could use it for the organization. The only problem that would really arise then, on behalf, the only problem then is when I got hit by a bus, I can log into my GitHub account, they wouldn't be able to manage that anymore. The main thing I think you'd need to consider that adds complexity is it's not so much the storing transactions and things like that, because you'll get the details of who that purchase was made for, which might be organization. But it's then you have to go like, okay, I now need to work out which organizations this user can act as a billable admin managing kind of person, which can get complicated, and you might end up needing to ask for permission to read all of the members of that organization to work out if some other user who's signed up, who's not paying because the org's paying, and then like, okay, is this user got access to this thing? Is you can actually ask the GitHub Marketplace that and try and hook it up. But then if they get removed from the org, you won't get told via a webhook over the marketplace that they are at that point. It is entirely org and team related. So as Devly said, a lot of people want to be able to just bill their marketplace purchases straight to their org. It all goes under one credit card bill every month. So for enterprisey kind of things, then that's definitely something people want. It's not too much of a problem when that like the management on your side of user versus org, like you could when in, we'll double check and we'll just assume that's fine, and we'll let action expire after a week or a day. So they have to keep logging in so that we can that they still have without needing to get to the point of like, oh, we literally have replicated all of GitHub's org permissions to be able to work out if that's if that user, and then you'd have webhooks for org and team membership, because a user might switch from being like, oh, I wasn't an admin and I'm no longer an admin, which gets a little bit hairy.
So as an initial starter for 10 though, we could have a plan that is personal only, so personal account only, and then at some point in the future, once we'd hooked up some more of that interactions that you kind of just spoken about there, we could have an organization specific plan. So we could have a different price point, and then we've kind of hooked in the sense checking that the currently logged in user is associated with this organization in order to perform those operations on behalf of those. I guess the only complexity on that one is that if a Well, no, that wouldn't work. No, that wouldn't work, would it? So let me ask you this then: if a user has their own personal account with our service, and they also have an organization account, when they sign in as an organization, or rather, they are signing in as the organization, not the individual that's associated with that organization. Is that correct? I.e., if they have both a personal account and an organization account, would we have to show both at the same time when logged in?
So this is where GitHub Apps versus Oauth Apps comes back into play, because a GitHub app allows a certain amount of, you can act as the user on their behalf, kind of thing. So, for example, when someone comments through Octobox on an issue, it actually says like they made this comment with Octobox because Octobox did the work rather than with a regular OAuth token. You literally like, I am pretending to be this user. Also, when you talk to the marketplace, there's a difference between if you're an OAuth app. If you're an OAuth app and you're talking to the marketplace, you use Bake Auth. Whereas if you're a GitHub app, you use a JSON web token. I think that's mostly mechanics rather than what you would be asking of the marketplace is for a given GitHub account, is there for this user, where a user was actively subscribed to the plan on the dedicated GitHub app, which is a bit weird because you don't really have an app to choose either of them, or they're not audited and they have a plan or they don't have a plan. When it asks for a user's purchases, that's not necessarily, that's only purchases that a user has made for themselves. If it's I think it gets a bit complicated there, and it's maybe a little bit of kind of trial error. Documentation is unclear around what that means, other than you want to say like, I have a associated marketplace with this, and then you're like, with what?
Yeah.
Is it with the whole thing, or is it with a particular org?
Gotcha.
I think you would only get one thing back. I don't think you would get an array of like this or that, like this org and that org and this personal thing. Whereas your list of webhooks that you stored against that user would be like, oh, this user has only ever purchased for themselves. And then we have webhooks that say this was purchased for this organization, if you had one of those in the future, which Octobox doesn't have. Octobox instead has app installation. So it stores the app installation, which may be installed against an org. It may be installed against a user. Then your purchase is made against the app installation. So it has a nice buffer between the, like, is this for a glass of water? Be back in a second.
Okay, so this is... So I'm not going to lie. I think this is slightly more complicated than I thought it was going to be. I don't know if Matthias had thoughts on how easy or simple this was going to be, but it's not impossible. I just naively thought that it was going to be click a button, boom, you can then start paying me for my amazing service. So it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. But the question that I still have is, how much of this do we want active, Matthias, before we go live? because based on what Andrew said before, I think you joined the chat room, was that in order for us to start charging money or receiving money, we had to have a certain number of people actually using the app in order to get listed in the marketplace. So we are going to want to have the number that was raised was like 200. So if with an Oauth app, we needed like 200 active users in order for it to start being a billable entity. So Kim's kind of agreeing with me that this is... So what I said, I don't know if your Bluetooth headphones worked, how far away you went away, Andrew, but...
They do, yes. I heard the whole conversation.
It's like, I naively thought that it was going to be like, click a button, and it was just going to work. And there's a little bit more to it than what I thought. And now, that's not a bad thing, because obviously it kind of prevents rubbish apps getting into the marketplace. There's a little bit of things that you have to do in order to get verified. And I totally get all of that sort of stuff. I do understand that. I thought it would be easier.
Yes. There are some other things. So there's some other things that you have to do to be able to get approved. So going through this like marketplace, what do they call it? Like check, pile of checklists, requirements for an app. You have to do a load of brand stuff. You basically then double check that you're not making false claims about GitHub or trying to persuade users to switch to Bitbucket or things like that. And then there's a load of things you have to build into your app. I'll paste the link over here.
Yes, that's the one I'm on. So that's the one I'm showing. Yeah. So it's like user experience, branding.
Then you have the security
view.
Yeah. So branding, pretty easy. User experience, basically they'll go through, they'll try and upgrade, downgrade, cancel, and check that it's reflected in your app within the time of work flows through. And when a user first purchases an app, I use app a lot, despite Oauth also working, then the user gets flung back to you through the Oauth process, which is convenient because if they've found your thing via the marketplace, then you don't have to send them around houses, or they don't have to work out like, I needed to log in as well. And they get sent to the right place. Security requires you to keep a certain amount of logs so you need to have logs that are reachable within 30 days. The last 30 days, you must be able to read those logs very quickly, and then they must be archived for at least 1 year. Okay. So if you're doing a lot of logging, that can actually be like it's not a zero cost. I'm sure Azure has a number of like features around being able to store pipe logs to somewhere else, but it does mean like you have to make that you're still logging stuff all the time, because they come back to you and be like, oh, what happened 6 months ago? Like,
but that's
I need to go look for these things.
Of the webhook, the communication between the app and my service. They obviously can't expect me to give away all of the logs of my service, correct?
So the wording they use is app logs, and they, as far as I'm aware, were looking for like anything that the user might have done relevant with their GitHub purchase.
Interesting. Okay.
They might not. So they don't say that they need access to those logs. They say that you must have them,
right?
I guess, in case of legal stuff.
Okay.
There's also a number of instant response, like you must be able to chase things up within 24 hours. Like there's quite a lot of things that you must be able to do. And then you've got all your data protection things, which if you're using GitHub Oauth as your only login, log out, then really the data protection, especially the like European stuff, is, oh, you've got their email address. Like, do the appropriate things with their email address. If they ask to delete their account, then make sure you delete their account. Which gets tricky when you've got like the year's worth of logs. You're like, oh no, I need to go like wipe out their stuff from the logs as well. Or I need to.
One of the things that came with the ASP.NET MVC application template, and this is what I'm showing on the screen just now, is that there is a section for. I can only assume that it was put in here for GDPR compliance. So you can click on your profile and there's a personal data section, and then there's a download button and there's a delete button. So by default, that download is giving you all of your data that is persisted in the Azure table storage, and then the delete button literally nukes the entire user entry from the database. So it's gone. But based on what you just said, it might be the case that we would want to be able to delete any logs associated with that user, but then that conflicts with what their requirements are and having all of that information available for a year. So we'd have to read up on the fine print around that one, I guess.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, I didn't think too much about it at the time.
Okay.
Mostly because it drives me insane after a certain while. You also want to ensure you're encrypting any tokens that you're storing.
Yeah.
So they shouldn't be stored as plain text in the database, even though the database is password protected, whatnot. And so that's like, they go through a number of things. It was really easy for Octobox because Octobox is open source. Mm-hmm. And so the reviewers could point at the source code.
Gotcha.
Whereas if your app is closed source, it becomes a little bit more of a black boxy kind of thing.
So on that note then, so we have, or the intention of this is that a lot of the IP, let's call it, the intellectual property, would be stored within what the service is responding to. We would be able to, for instance, make the I think I'm right in saying this, Matthias would correct me if I'm wrong. If we needed to make things easier, we could make the website open source. But what's actually feeding in from the outside would not be open source. I don't know how that would work in terms of what they would need access to. In terms of what the user is interacting with.
I don't think they need access to anything. It just happened to make it very easy for us.
Gotcha.
Yeah. They definitely, like, there's lots of proprietary things on the GitHub Marketplace.
Yeah.
The only tokens you need to store are the Oauth tokens for the users when they've logged in, or if you're using GitHub app, then you get the GitHub app token as part of the Oauth flow.
So I think what Matthias is saying there is that, so Matthias is trying to say we wouldn't need to store any tokens, but if we were making additional requests to the API, the REST API, we would need to send that user's auth token with the request, correct? Or incorrect?
Yeah, if you don't ever want to talk to the GitHub API as that user, then you don't need the tokens. The part of me is at the back of my mind is saying, if you never store those tokens, you can guarantee that there's going to be a point where you're like, oh no, I really wish we had tokens for these users. When you're talking on the GitHub Marketplace, you'd act as the app or the OAuth app. Okay. So you'd be all right there. It's mostly like if you wanted to ever do anything, any user that had not, you'd have to get them to go through the process again to be able to fill out that new field if you decided you then wanted to collect it, which might leave you with a load of users that are invalid.
Okay.
But yeah, you can definitely, if you're not going to want to do anything with the GitHub API, then you don't need to store the token, I think. You've got your own.
In terms of the workflow, so Matthias will correct me if I'm wrong because he's now listening. So in terms of our workflow is, again, Kim has created a plan. He has paid us lots of money, and we've stored that via a webhook that came in from the GitHub Marketplace into our database that says Kim has a valid subscription. Kim then logs into our front-end website as him, and he adds a subscription. That subscription is then stored in our database, and based on what you said, we could then check periodically that Kim still has an active subscription by calling the
you'd also be
API.
pinged via webhooks to say, oh, he doesn't.
Yeah.
He's cancelled it.
So the only time that the user is interacting with the site is when they're changing that subscription. Once that subscription is saved, we're always running in the background, and we're just saying, is there a subscription with this thing? If there is, do something else. So as long as we kind of do that reconciliation on a periodic basis to see that, or the webhook has come in to say that subscription is now inactive or changed or whatever, then the background process that we have running is literally just looking at that saved data to see should that subscription or should that thing go out to that user. So on that basis, I don't know if we would need to store a token or not, because I don't think we would. Because
if you're not using any of the GitHub API, you could probably get away with not storing it. It's only if you say you wanted to collect like, oh, they're like, we originally weren't collecting their real name, only their GitHub username, and then we decided we wanted to do that, and we wanted to go across every existing user and pick it up again.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Instead, you'd have to have it like, oh, well, we'll lazily pick it up every time that a user logs back in again.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could definitely get around that, and that avoids you storing extra bits that would potentially give you like any kind of worry of holding on to those tokens. I guess the other thing you want to bear in mind is as your webhooks are coming in and telling you like, oh, this user's stuff is no longer, like, the user subscription has expired, or they've cancelled it on GitHub and they never came back to the site to tell you like that's happened. And I guess you have to consider that your code then might be like, well, they had 4 things in the database, but they're not supposed to have 4 things in the database anymore. And so maybe we should tell them or email them, or we need to have something like, rather than just the UI of like, oh, whenever the user interacts with it, we can tell them like, oh, you're not allowed to do this anymore. There's something you need to do, but also you want to be able to go like, are we going to just stop doing stuff, or are we going to give them some like, are we going to limit them to the first 3 things?
So,
or a random?
So my thought process around that might be, for example, it would be kind of last in, first out. So it's like, if the 4th subscription is the last one that went in, if their subscription ends, it goes away, and that's the first one that gets plugged out. But what we could do is, if the service said that subscription should have done something, we might want to send them a wee email saying that you have an active subscription, but you haven't paid for it, but you would have got whatever this is if that had been paid for. So we kind of suck them in again. We say, you haven't got an active subscription, but you would have got one for this one that's in the database, but you haven't paid us for it. So we're not going to tell you what it was, but we're just going to tell you there was one. So,
yes.
So yeah, suck them in.
Capitalism.
Suck them in, yeah. Get them hooked, and then keep them there. That's what we should do. So, I like it.
I like it. So something when doing webhook development, I just noticed that I made a note, is that you can't make webhooks get sent to localhost. So you might want to use something like exists on Windows, or a similar local tunnel kind of thing. To you can basically put that into your GitHub app or Oauth app. I'm not sure.
So that's one of the things. So on the last Monday night stream, Matthias walked us through the process of running ngrok for specifically that purpose. So, because I'd heard of ngrok before, but I'd never used it. So we got to see that running, and he kind of walked through what we needed to do at the GitHub site to make that flow through. So he's played with that a lot. So I'm going to lean on him for that part of it.
I'm just looking at the Oauth app settings for one of my apps to see because when you list something on the marketplace, like an OAuth app doesn't have a webhook URL by default. So I'm intrigued to see what happens there, like how you set a webhook URL on an OAuth app. So I'm just going to poke around here, and it basically says, oh, okay. So in the process of creating a draft marketplace thing, whatever they call it, one of the checkboxes you need to do is it says manage webhook, and it's basically like put your payload URL in here, and if you want to send it as JSON or as a form encoded thing, and the secret, and then check it. So you can definitely do that. Like it works exactly the same as an app with the OAuth app there, without any, like, it's just that with an app, when you make the app, even before you've listed on the marketplace, you have a webhook.
So I don't think I'm giving the game away, but what I've put into the stream is the screen that I think you're on just now. So it's manage webhook, and there's a space for a payload URL, content type, and then a secret and one that's active. So this is a draft OAuth app that I have set up, and then what you're saying is I could put in the ngrok URL in there, or some other routable thing with a secret, and then when a webhook comes from this listing into that service that I set up, or that API that I set up, and I think Matthias is saying would be an application JSON content type, we could test this before this actually becomes a active listing. So you mentioned that we could test that. Is that right?
Yeah. So there's a certain amount that you've got the webhook testing page, which is broadly like different. I've got the stream open as well. I should close that. Probably kill my internet. So that page there I just posted in the chat will give you the links, all of the details of how to go about testing the mechanics of the webhook. Okay. And then from the marketplace point of view, there is, again, somewhere inside this doc, there is basically a way that if you've got a draft marketplace listing, that you can make a purchase, and it's like a fake purchase. You don't actually get billed for it.
Right.
You can also do kind of a handy thing where you can say, oh, if my webhook failed, say you got an application error or you weren't running ngrok at the time, then you can hit a redeliver button and you get you can keep resending it until it comes through with the thing that you you hoped, and that your application successfully handled it. Where is it? Testing GitHub Marketplace apps is the link. Again, hidden somewhere inside that navigation. It basically allows you to simulate purchase events that look like you've bought it, but you'll never actually get billed for it. It will show up on your GitHub personal settings for like, oh, I've tried to buy this thing, but it won't ever charge you. If that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. So that will be useful. So assuming that I get the new API endpoint set up, I could create a fake purchase to this OAuth app that I've set up a plan for. And just to put it in context, so the current plan that I set up last month or last week was I have a plan that is $1,000 a month, and it's $10,000 for a year, because that's what people are going to pay us for this service. I wouldn't be billed for that necessarily. I could test that out and say I want to purchase that, and then that would send a webhook, but I wouldn't actually get billed for it. But to make sure that didn't happen, I might want to make that a smaller number, just so that I definitely don't get
maybe.
So we have that. So like I was toying with the plans just to kind of see what it did, and we jokingly said it was going to be £1,000 a month or $1,000 a month for all of this. So obviously that won't be the case.
I also noticed you can't pay for GitHub apps with coupons. If you happen to have a coupon for GitHub, it will not go towards. So I found this out because I have a free coupon because I used to work at GitHub. And so I got a coupon for $3 a month, but that doesn't work for GitHub apps. Gotcha. So I just have to pay for the GitHub apps. Gotcha. I just get the free personal account you would pay for, whatever it's GitHub Pro it's called now or something, isn't it?
Yeah. So
cool.
Matthias is saying in the chat room that actually using ngrok right now to add a check to cake repo for PRs to target default branch. You can also replay it within ngrok, which is nice for local development. So yeah, he's quite knowledgeable about the usage of ngrok. So I'm going to pick his brain about how he does certain things. So
ngrok is very cool, especially as it allows you to put SSL on your local apps if you're doing anything with service workers in the browser that you would need it to be served under SSL, even if you're not going out. If you don't need to access it from like the public internet, it just allows you to easily put a local SSL server, and it's pretty fast.
Yeah. So I need to. So Kim in the chat room is saying that sounds like an interesting topic for next Monday's stream. So on that topic, no, I'm not doing a stream next Monday. It's the final week of the kids' summer holidays here in Scotland, so we're away. So I'm not doing a stream next Monday or next Friday. So it'll have to be at the very least, it'll be the week after. And I have spoken to Matthias about, because he's currently on vacation, so part of me surprised that he's in the chat room today, but he's obviously got the kids to sleep and the okay from the wife, because he's still on vacation, but he's back next week. So we need to hook something up, because I would like to get together. I'll probably try and get Matthias up there where Andrew is on the stream, so that we can work together on some of this, because I need his input on certain things. But it won't be won't be next Monday, but maybe the Monday after. He just can't stay away. Absolutely. He's checking up on me to make sure I'm not giving the game away. That's what it is. Okay, so let me. I think I've got everything in my head now. So let me do a quick sanity check recap. So we've got an Oauth app. We've decided that we were going to go with an Oauth app rather than a GitHub app for now. So we've got that. We're already using that for the purposes of authentication. I'm going to go into this draft marketplace listing, and I'm going to set up potentially one or more plans for each level. That will be translated into something that will identify that plan when someone buys that and that will come over to my application via a webhook. What I'm going to need to do is set up an API method that will receive that webhook and store that information. And then when the user logs into my application, I will do a sanity check against what I've stored and potentially back to the Marketplace API as well, just to make sure that things are in sync, to say that that person's allowed to do what they want to be able to do right now. And then from there, my application will then allow them to create additional subscriptions or whatever other functionality we light up based on what plan is available. And after that, the back-end processes of the services are going to kick in so that those subscriptions are going to be active. It's going to do some stuff based on those. And then my webhook is also going to be listening for additional webhooks, which is the subscription was cancelled or it wasn't renewed or whatever other events come through. That API endpoint is going to look after that information and keep that up to date in my database. And then again, when the backend service is running, it will say, is the subscription still active? If it is, it'll continue to do stuff. Otherwise, it'll take some other action. And I think all of that's doable. That's just work. I need to figure that out. So based on my limited exposure, I've used OctoKit for certain things in the past, and that was for whatever you. We've got a random thing that we have for Cake, which is trying to make sure that the permissions between GitHub and AppVeyor are in sync. So I've used OctoKit to query the GitHub API for the projects and teams that are in GitHub, and then translate them over to AppVeyor to make sure that everything's in sync. So I'm reasonably familiar with using OctoKit to do things on against the GitHub API. I've never used the Marketplace API specifically, but I would like to think that information's exposed through OctoKit. But if it's not, it's just a REST API, right? So it's literally just a HTTP call to an endpoint with a specific payload, and you'll get a response back that you then serialize and do what you need to do with it. So even if OctoKit doesn't expose a specific API, it's accessible just with raw HTTP.
Yes, the only gotcha there is for an OAuth app, you'll be doing authentication via basic
as opposed
auth.
to the JOT that you mentioned before. Yeah, that makes sense.
Or like if you're just doing regular OAuth calls with using a user's token, that would be like, oh, I can just pass this as a parameter or as a header or as a number of different ways. But you need to do basic auth.
Okay, and that's fine. And then the only other question that I have then is, in terms of Octobox,
Octobox or OctoKit?
Octobox. There's lots of Octos out there, but yeah, Octobox specifically. So you also enabled payments for your plans through Open Collective. What was the decision point there? Why did you do that? And why have both? Is what I'm getting at. And would you add another payment provider into Octobox, or do you now have enough surface area in terms of what people want to give you money for?
So we did, and we have considered adding Stripe as a third option.
Okay.
Because the Stripe user experience is really nice. It's still a little bit annoying because then we have to send the user back over to GitHub to make sure they've installed the correct app on the correct organization and all that, like without going through the marketplace, because the marketplace will be like, oh, you need to buy the thing before you can install the thing. But actually, you don't need to buy the thing before you can install the thing if you send the user to the right URL. The reason that we have Open Collective on there, partly because GitHub takes 25% of all sales through the marketplace upfront, which is painful, and Open Collective effectively takes 3%, I think.
Okay.
But the key is the money that you get through Open Collective isn't just pure profit that you can extract, because Open Collective is about it's a essentially the money goes to a charity that holds on to it, which is set up as the kind of accounting sponsor open ledger for the community that's working on that project. So because Octobox is an open source project, we have like, oh, you can donate money to Open Collective if you'd like to support the development of the open source project. That money doesn't go to Octobox Limited, the company, which is the company that is like legally the one that's responsible for the GitHub Marketplace integration. Instead, it goes to the Octobox Open Collective, and then anyone that does some work on Octobox can send invoices. Currently, the only people that send invoices are me for our random costs, and like when we got some pin badges made, or for when before we were making money through the GitHub Marketplace, we invoiced the server costs, but now we make enough to pay for the server costs, and we basically keep it all in dollars. So GitHub Marketplace pays in dollars as well, which if you're in the UK, slightly annoying because you need like either you transfer from dollars into pounds as the pound continues to fall through, and then if you're hosting in America or you're paying hosting costs in dollars, then you need to convert back to dollars when you pay that, which is, so we keep the money that comes out of GitHub Marketplace in a US currency bank account, which then pays Heroku in dollars and keeps things simple. But we mostly wanted it there so that users could basically say, do we want to support the open source project, or do we want to support Andrew and Ben in running this instance of the open source project?
Gotcha.
Because anyone else could put Octobox on the GitHub Marketplace as well if they wanted to. Okay. We don't have a trademark. Maybe we should have a trademark, but the idea is that it's very much a community-driven project, and that it's on there because we wanted to be able to make it sustainable so that it would run for the long term rather than being entirely dependent on us donating time and resources.
Gotcha.
And it's supporting like 17,000 people using it without and still keeping some money in the bank. Yeah. So that's working out quite nicely.
So your preference then is that, so I currently pay you through Open Collective. Is that your preference, or should I be doing it through the GitHub Marketplace? Based on the charges, your preference is Open Collective? Or
so if you wanted to give me the money, then you're still better off putting it through the GitHub Marketplace.
Okay.
But I prefer it to go to Open Collective because then it is actually like bolstering up the whole community rather than just Octobox, the limited UK company that is a for-profit standard enterprise kind of thing. Okay. And also maybe slightly reduces the amount of accounting overhead. I'm not sure. Probably not. So it's more complicated than it needs to be, but Ben does like to make things slightly more complicated to prove different points. And we have shown that we can build a sustainable open source project. That we donated. I want to say it was basically all the money that we had spent through Open Collective on server hosting since the dawn of Octobox being on Open Collective. We donated the money we'd received through the GitHub Marketplace equivalent back into the Open Collective last month to basically say, like, all this money that was used to pay for servers, we made it from the marketplace. Here it is again, so that you can spend this on the community, in the community pull requests, and actually then bill for their time rather than just donate like free work. Cool. Because we wanted to show that you should be able to support and we haven't quite got there yet because we've both been busy doing other things. But the money is now there to be able to donate to the projects that Octobox is built on top of. Yeah. So we can then start to feed that down through there's the different libraries that are running inside of Octobox that are maintained by people that don't have much resources. Like we can donate some of what we made through Octobox to for just standing on their shoulders and relying on them to keep on top of their security fixes and things like that. Yeah. So that feels really good. And in theory, we could also add in more payment processors without any extra work because we have like purchases and plans which maps to most payment processors without any like extra I don't think you need much extra data. You might need a few extra fields for like Stripe ID or Braintree.
So right now you've got OC_transaction ID, but you might have Stripe transaction ID, and that's the thing that links it back.
Yeah, and you probably have like Stripe an ID or something like that. If you want to go talk to Stripe ID, then you can go pluck out the particular record that you would have, and so that you can, because with Stripe you do a lot of the work in the browser, which then sends like encrypted stuff to your server to say, go load this from the Stripe API, so that we didn't actually send any transactions directly through your web server. We did it all in the browser over HTTP from stripe.com or whatever it is. But
Stripe would give you the ability to have kind of those different levels as well. So what you can do in the GitHub Marketplace, you could add that information into Stripe, I think, to then be able to say that.
Yeah, you can make lots of different plans in Stripe. Yeah. Stripe has all kinds of different things that you can do, and it does coupons, and you can set up like prorated billing to certain points in the month.
Yeah.
Like way more than you really, unless you're building some really extreme stuff. You can even set up Stripe to be able to like set up stripes on top of Stripe, which is, but again, I don't think you'd need to do that in this case. I think from what you've told me, you should be able to get quite a long way just using like the minimal amount of stuff. It's really only when you get to wanting to have the orgs as a real entity,
yes,
rather than just as a like someone paid and they've said they paid on behalf of this org, which is probably fine. You could also make, rather than try and map the GitHub permissions, you could make it so that someone could pay for the org via the marketplace, and that would get recorded, and then that person that did that could manually, through your system, invite other people. You could basically email them a link and say,
I see what you're saying. Okay,
accept this invite, and that basically then gets managed on your side. It means that you've reinvented a small amount of the wheel, but it's a much smaller wheel then that you don't worry about too much. And then you choose like, oh well, it's probably not a big deal. Like I don't think you're planning to handle a lot of sensitive transactional data through this service. It's not like
no, not in the. I mean, certainly not in the early stages.
Or malicious users coming in and like swiping lots of users' private data through it.
No, I mean, we don't want to appear on Troy Hunt's Have I Been Pwned website or anything like that. I mean, we're not planning on storing anything. I mean, that's kind of why we kind of added in the GitHub auth flow to start with, because we didn't want to have to store username and password. We wanted that to be handled out with, and then all we got back was that this user is authenticated and this is the user record that is going to drive those things. So no, I think all this makes sense. I mean, the one thing that's going through my head is whether so based on everything that I've seen and everything you've described, is whether we would want to do the GitHub Marketplace stuff or whether we would just go to something like Stripe straight away, is kind of the thing that's going through my head. Part of me thinks that we still get a lot for free from the GitHub Marketplace in terms of the listing, the visibility, and all that sort of stuff that comes with it, because people are already on GitHub and already using it, as opposed to trying to drive people to the site and use Stripe or whatever else we want to use. So, I mean, but we would still have stuff to do with Stripe in terms of setting up and storing, and I don't know how you get a response back from Stripe, if that's a webhook that we'd have to hook up or whether it's a responsive browser
webhooks.
we have to handle, all that sort of stuff. So there's still questions there that we need to be answered. So
to give you a picture of how much you might get through the marketplace, I can share some stats of how much Octobox has been viewed through the GitHub Marketplace.
Okay, yeah, that'd be good, yeah.
So in the past month, we've had to the github.com/marketplace/Octobox page, 464 visitors, and they've done 968 page views, so it's about 2 pages per visitor.
Yep.
And weirdly, the conversion number, unique visitors landing on this page, is not the same number as the number of visitors, which I don't understand, but sure. 443 unique people have landed on that page. 82 of those, which is 18%, went to the checkout. And again, slightly weird number, 121 went from the checkout to a new subscription. And that is because a user can create multiple subscriptions for the different organizations that they're a member of. So I might go there and be like, oh, well, I'm going to add my own personal one, and I'm going to add one for the different org I work in.
Yep.
And so then you can see the inactive customers as well. Customers who app but not installed it. That's really weird. Customers who have not installed the app. So maybe this number is also a little bit weird because of the free plan that we have. So you can sign up for a free plan. You never have to install the app. It doesn't hurt. Octobox works without the GitHub app installed. It just makes it better if you do have it installed.
All the labels,
so we have
and all that sort of stuff, and it just all the extra bits that you need. You need a certain amount of Oauth access for, and then it also shows you the free trial conversion. Out of the 10 free trials that have ended this period, 6 of them have converted to paid. That's 60% of completed trials, which is like it gives you a good amount of things. It shows you like there's been 108 new free subscriptions this month, and then I don't even know why there are. That number's weird. New free trial subscriptions. I imagine that means only for paid plans, and then there's also been 6 new paid subscriptions this month. And then it gives you some transaction breakdown, but really it's just they embed a CSV in the page, which you need to go put somewhere else because it's pretty awful. But it gives you a little bit of insight. It doesn't give you a lot of exposure. We get a lot more exposure from Twitter and for people sharing it, going like, this is actually there's like a number of programmers that stream on Twitch and that drive their work from Octobox is a really good source of people coming in. The actual number of people discovering on the marketplace is not huge because there's actually quite a few things on there. Depends on the category as well, and it depends on how much they give you in terms of exposure, which is kind of weird. There are some categories that you can manually choose that you want to be part of. There's one category that's called like new or recently added, and that is one that you can choose whether you want to be in or not, out of your 3 categories. And so we've been in there for 8-9 months now. They don't remove you. So there are ones in there that like the Jira software integration. I'm pretty sure that's existed for a good while. So people aren't necessarily going to find your thing unless they're already expecting to look for it, and then they'll probably find it via Google if you've got reasonable SEO. So okay. I mean, like I said, I think either way, I mean, whether it's the GitHub Marketplace or whether it's Stripe or some other payment provider, there's going to be work to set that up, and it's just a case of maybe which one is most well known, which one's documented, all that sort of stuff. And
I found Open Collective to be quite easy to hook up in terms of using it as a, but the catch is that the money does to you. So you're then publicly invoicing for your prices. So you'd be like, here's the Azure bill for this month. I've uploaded it to Open Collective, and they paid that back off, which might be totally reasonable if it's a community project. But if you also want to have the enterprise side of it, then you might need to be able to flip it around and do multiple different things. But most payment systems have that similar kind of plan and a purchase, and you don't ever delete either of them. You just keep cycling and updating, and the user points at one of those things. And if a user deletes their account, you don't delete their purchase data, at least because it doesn't necessarily have any personal information in it. It just means that if they come back, then you're like, oh, well, they accidentally deleted their account, but they're still paying. then
yeah,
we should be able to hook them all back up again, kind of
Gotcha.
thing. But it's entirely, once you get down to the particulars, you can and ah about a lot of different things. But I think having the basic webhook flow for a user that has like the plan is synced on a regular basis, as well as the purchases being listened to and actioned based as soon as the webhook comes in, and then your logic that's basically like, can this user do something? Well, does this record exist and have a number greater than 4? Then off they go, kind of thing. That basically will get you for like a good amount of the way, and you didn't need to worry about handling credit cards or doing any kind of
that's true.
Dealing with the monetary side of things. I believe GitHub security will make sure that you're running under SSL for everything, but on Azure, it's all going to be really easy to set those things up.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think that's all in terms of questions, I think that's all I had. So, any questions from the chat room before I guess we start wrapping this up? Or any questions, I guess, from you, Andrew? I mean, I want to thank you for your time. This has been really useful, actually. Like I said,
I'm glad it was useful. I'm starting to lose my voice. I'm not used to speaking for 2 hours straight.
I mean, I've said this to a few people, but doing the whole stream thing, it's great fun, but it does take it out of you because you're kind of having think on your feet and answer questions and do stuff. It takes its toll, right? But this has been really useful. I know we didn't get into any of the code side of stuff, but I think for me, it wasn't so much the coding side of it. It was, like I said, as I said at the start, how I thought it was going to work is completely the complete opposite, the polar opposite of how I expected it to work. I'm not calling the GitHub API periodically to say, what is your current subscription level, and are you okay to do this action on my site? It's, I've purchased a plan, tell the application about it, and then the application stores that. So that for me was kind of a eureka moment. So that was definitely useful. So I think what needs to be done now is myself and Matthias need to get together and decide when we go live, and obviously based on this marketplace thing, we need to be able to show a certain level of usage before we can even start having the paid for side of stuff. So that's a limitation, but I think that's okay because, as you said, our free tier is essentially just going to be the user logged in and they have an account now. And yeah, Maurice is saying in the chat room, we need to create an Azure function for the webhook stuff, but that will be part of the testing that we need to do. So we'll need to write that Azure function, because as of right now, I can bring this up just so that people see it. Right now, in terms of our API, we only have 4 functions, and that is the add subscription, edit subscription, get subscription, and get subscriptions. So we need another one that is the webhook, and then it will take all of that webhook data, store that into the relevant database table within Azure Storage, and then Azure Table Storage, and then make that available. So, and lock down the API only to authorize. Okay, technicalities, Kim, but yes, we're going to get there. So that's the other point that. Kim, at the minute, the API has been written in such a way that anybody and their uncle can get in. We're not. There's literally no. It's security through obscurity, let's call it at the minute. It's we're not going to expose the API directly to the public. It's the website is going to be the front facing part of it, and then it from the server side is going to call it our API. But Kim's making the very valid point that we need to lock that down, and most likely that's going to be based on well, as you said earlier, firewall and incoming IP address. I mean, we'll know the IP address of the service that's running the website, so we'll only accept requests coming in from there. But then also knowing that the logged in user is not a malicious one and things. So, and Maurice is pointing out, we have no security right now, and we don't. I mean, it's so that's one of the things of the stream, right? There's only so much that we can do in a stream, because some things we're going to want to hide some of these things, because we don't necessarily want people watching these videos back and ripping apart exactly how we built something in order to attack it. So some of it is being left out deliberately, but other things we just haven't thought about yet. So
I wouldn't worry about that too much. Like Octobox, all of its billing and integration is wide open for anyone to see. The only things that are hidden are the tokens, basically, and the URLs. But those URLs you can work them out and just put at the start of them. The thing to do is to make sure that you're confident of the correct levels of, like, oh yeah, this is covered and that's covered, and this would never be able to be reached unless you're inside of this DMZ or whatever. The other thing that I think I did mention, but just to reiterate, you'll need to have a UI that shows you your GitHub subscriptions before they allow, and basically that gives a link to bounce over to the GitHub settings page for that subscription, and also maybe upgrade if you can upgrade. I don't think if you only have one plan, then it's not a big deal. And the other thing to bear in mind is that the GitHub Marketplace approval process is very slow, or at least it was very slow. And I've spoken to other people and they like, oh my God, this took 4 months.
Really? Okay.
And there's not really any good reason why it takes 4 months. They're just really slow to respond to a lot of things. And so what you can start to do is as soon as you're ready to go live, you can submit your application, because by the time they get round to actually thinking about it and reviewing it, you probably will have picked up your 200 free users. So you don't need to wait for your 200 free users before.
Right.
Like, don't let that be a blocker. Just dive in, and they'll probably see like, oh, this is legitimate. And like, by the time that all the security review and all of the UX review and everything is done, that you've reached that point. I mean, some of the people that are testing it will contribute towards that 200 number conveniently.
So on that point, though, so how do you? Well, no, I was going to say, how do you monetize it? Because at that point, you can't until it's in the marketplace. So it's not. What I was going to say was, well, how do we, from our website, say you can buy this thing? We can't.
So you
can't
basically
until it's in the marketplace. Yes.
So we had an environment variable set on Octobox somewhere. There's a thing called the configurator, or something like is it configure? Oh god, I can't find it. But basically, we had a flag set in an environment variable, which on Heroku you can edit from the website, and that turned it on. And what we had initially was we did like a dark mode where it was enabled. It's just, and if you knew the URL to go to, it worked. So that for the 2 users that had the ability to do the whole draft marketplace purchase, were able to try it out and check that it all works against the live environment.
Gotcha.
And then we could send other people. We say, oh, here's the URL. You could also do it with, say, like an array of usernames that were allowed to see that button. And then when everything felt good, then we flipped the environment variable, and then I went through and deleted all the conditional code that was like, right, this is all good now, and took it all out so that it was live for everyone all the time. But in the case of Octobox, it still has a load of conditionals, because it's like, if you're running as octobox.io, which is the regular hosted version, then different bits show up, marketplace stuff shows up. Whereas if that is false, which is the default, if you run your own version or if there's a corporate one, then none of the marketplace stuff comes to life. It just does regular GitHub app.
Gotcha.
And there's a few conditional bits that but it's really not too painful. I also, because it's free software, I really don't check the alternative version. If someone has a problem, they'll report an issue. I mostly just consider the main case, and then if someone does tell me, then I'll go fix it if it's broken for use case.
But no, Kim's pointing in the chat room that in this sort of scenario, you would have beta access for a year, 6 months, however long it is, give people access to everything, and then once you have access to take paid subscriptions, then that's when things potentially start getting turned off because they're only allowed those 3 subscriptions until they pay. So that's another kind of methodology to flow through too.
Yeah, or you could grandfather people in as well to say thank you for being an early user. We did that with a few Octobox people who tested things out, or maybe they could log in with a Twitch account and it'd be like, they're subscribed to my Twitch channel, so they get 1 month free.
Interesting. But no, so
Twitch has an Oauth login as well.
It does,
if you wanted to do that.
So on one of the first streams that we did with this, we kind of went through the Oauth providers that you can get for ASP.NET MVC, and there was just literally there was a whole screen of them. It was like 40 or so different ones that you can use to enable different login methods on the site. So it's definitely, there's no shortage of those things yet. But no, okay, so that all makes sense. So I guess we just need to code it now and get it done. But
you just got to get on with it. There's no excuses.
No excuses at all, apart from time. I mean, that's the only other issue that I have with this, because the agreement with the wife that I have is that I get this slot of a Monday evening is when I get to get stuff done, and then I come away from these streams sometimes with all these great ideas, and then nothing actually happens until the Monday after. You know what I mean? It's that scenario where I've got all these great ideas and I want to do things, but then it's not until the next Monday that I actually get to do things. And in this case, next Monday isn't going to be next Monday because I'm on holiday, so it'll be a fortnight at least. So, and as Maurice has pointed out, it's I have a to-do list. I mean, like you, I've got a few different open source projects I contribute to, and it's divvying up your time.
Finding the balance.
Yeah, it's kind of hard, right? And now that I technically work for an open source project as well, it's where's the switch off? Because I'm working during the day for my open source project that I work for and get paid for, and then I'm continuing to do open source work of an evening, of a weekend. So where is the work-life balance at that point? Because it's still all open source, right? It's a weird sort of mindset to get into, but it's a good one, don't get me wrong. But it's where's that switch off? Where's the switch to say that I'm not doing stuff anymore? So it's an interesting one.
It's tricky. I've cut down a lot on doing a number of different open source projects at the start of the year. I basically gave away the commit bit to a couple of really old projects that I don't use anymore. They're still used by a lot of people. One of them has an open collective that gets like $200 a month in donations, and was like, well, I don't use it, and I don't really want to worry about it. So instead, I put a call out on Twitter and said, does anyone want to try this out? And if you want to invoice your time against it, then go for it. That money is there from the community to support the community. And so I've kind of made a bit more breathing room to then focus on the bits that I'm really interested in, which is become much more package manager and less Octobox has reached a point where it's working really well. It's also reached a point where GitHub are they haven't actually shipped something that makes Octobox Sherlock it. Have you heard of that term, Sherlocking?
I have, yes.
So that to make Octobox unnecessary, I reckon there's still a good year before they actually publicly ship anything. But I'm not prepared to invest huge amounts of time in it to only then have it like, oh no, everyone who was paying has switched to just using the new free GitHub feature. So I'm spending a lot more time on the bits of package management that really interest me. And then if Octobox needs a little fix here or there, then there's money to pay for if someone wants to actually like make some time for it. Then rather than just say donate it, then pay for it, because it turns out it's not the individuals that donate, but it's companies that are like, oh, this is like a useful thing for us, and we want to make sure that it does this X or Y, or then like put your money where your mouth is, because I'm not going to maintain your pull request for you on an ongoing basis. Like,
that's it.
Even if people send you pull requests, sometimes it's like, that's great, but what you're really asking is for me to look after the result of merging this for like 3 years.
Absolutely.
Which is a big ask. Whereas if you can back that up with some regular donation, it's not one individual then, it's like a trusted community, even if that community is small.
So just before we close out then, I have two questions. One semi-related to what you just said and one completely random. For Octobox, is there anyone actively working on the automated action side of things? There's an open issue about automatically doing something to a notification or an entry in Octobox, i.e. If an issue gets closed, it automatically gets archived, that sort of thing. Is that...
So there's not anyone working on that right now, no.
Okay.
It's in a quite good place for us to get started on, I think. But I haven't felt the need for it because I unsubscribed from very popular repos, and so I haven't felt the pain myself to drive me to do that yet.
So I haven't either, but the question came from, I think we were speaking to him the other day, so Rob has just signed up to Octobox. I've been telling him about Octobox so Rob Reynolds, fervent coder, I've been telling him about Octobox for forever, and he signed up a couple days ago.
He had some trouble paying.
He initially had some issues, and I think you were speaking to him privately to get those ironed out. But one of the first things that he asked for was an automated action. He wanted the ability to, when it reached a certain state or some other decision point, he wanted to be able to automatically do something to it. And I pointed him at the open issue that said that there was, it is on the radar, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's actively being worked on.
There is an API for Octobox if people wanted to try and do stuff there without needing to directly, without needing to like get their fingers in the code or to know any Ruby. There's a REST API that uses you can basically go in the settings and make an API token, which then you can use to like do all of the things you would do through the UI. So you could read stuff, you could go like, oh, stuff has happened, I should archive this. But there isn't a webhook API, so to speak, that would tell your integration to like, oh, something's happened, you can go work on something else to make it more automatic. You basically need to run something on a regular basis. As a very lightweight way of doing that, it's something that was initially dreamed up, and then like there's a bit of bike shedding, and there's a lot of scope creep possible in that particular feature that kind of scary, or that like if you have a little bit, it's never going to be just enough for someone, and they're going to want to. One other person wants something. Oh, else. I need a little bit more automation. So the search was kind of done in a way that was like, oh, you could probably get around a lot of this by just making some smart search queries.
Yes, and
using
that
for browsing.
That's something I actively make use of, the different searches that you can in the search query syntax to kind of bubble up.
You can select everything of a particular kind of thing, and then you can easily select all and archive.
Absolutely.
That's what I use for powering through things.
Yes, I tend to do that as well. And the other one, completely random. I know at the start of the year you put out a call for 24 pull requests. Has anyone taken you up on that for the end of the year? 'Cause I've been an avid user of 24 pull requests for, I think, the last 3, maybe 4 years. So is that happening this year, or is it not looking likely?
So someone did, and I pondered it, and then I was like, I really don't feel, compared to the other open source projects that I gave away that were libraries that didn't have any, they're not an application that's running and that's full of users' data and tokens and other things, that I was like, I don't really feel comfortable in giving this away entirely. So what I've currently been like, well, see how I feel towards the end of the year, and maybe just turn it on and have it run, and kind of try and get some people to help out with if it has issues or pull requests that come into itself. But
I've been watching you merging all the Dependabot PRs that are coming in for it.
Well, so it's still running. It's still running on the internet, so I need to make sure that it doesn't end up exposing itself.
Absolutely.
And it's really easy with Octobox to be like, oh, there's a passing pull request. I can merge that one. And yeah, it's one of the few projects that I like to keep fairly good hygiene on.
Cool.
But it's kind of we'll see how it goes at the moment. I'm not sure if it's worth doing it again. Everyone kind of seems to have switched over to, there's a number of like other things, and GitHub pushes Hacktoberfest really hard. And it just kind of sucked a lot of the fun out of it, because there's so many people that pop into the Gitter channel like, oh, what swag can I get for this?
I mean, that's the one thing this last couple of years I've been manning the Gitter for 24 pull requests, and that's like the prime question that everyone asks is like, what do I get for free for this? I'm like, well, actually there's nothing. It's just kind of it's a festive
not
time,
quite the right way to
giving.
think about it.
It's not. It's unfortunate because Hacktoberfest is kind of all about that, and then you get people gaming the system to get PRs in just to get a free T-shirt, and it's like it's not really what it's about. But so no, I mean, I take your point on that. It's
So I'm not writing it off. I'm definitely like, I haven't shut it down. And it's mostly depends on my energy level towards the
fair enough.
In November. And who knows, Brexit might have all been rolled back and everything will be great. And we can bring 24 progress back.
I mean, like I said, I was just genuinely curious because I thought I'd take the time while you were here to ask the question. So it's something I'm not going to say.
Well, you're the first person to ask.
Okay. Well, that's a shame. I mean, like I say, I
haven't forgotten about the project. It's a nice
bit of fun in the winter month. It's been good fun. I've enjoyed doing it. So that's on Open Collective as well, and there's still people donating money, and it pays for its like, what's it, $42, $45 a month at the moment, and then it goes way up at Christmas, obviously. I don't think I knew that it was on Open Collective. I'll have to go and have a look at that because
the URL is pretty guessable, but I will paste it in there.
I was just going to search, but
funnily enough, DigitalOcean sponsors it. Started this year. I think that's slightly a guilty spot.
Maybe. That's maybe another one I'll have to sign up. That's maybe another one I'll have to sign up to. I went through my Open Collective things recently, and it was hard because I turned some of them off because I wanted to turn on some of the other ones, but I'd given some Open Collectives for like a year or so, and it's like I'm not really using it right now, but at the time I was, so I had to switch it off, and then I added on some other ones. I felt there was guilt involved in removing subscription.
I have that with Patreon. People drop off Patreon. I'm like,
It's a difficult one because, like, I mean, I'm lucky in the sense that Chocolatey has this concept of giving back to the community as well, similar to what you were mentioning earlier. So from a company perspective, I know that we contribute back to the libraries that we're making use of. But also from a personal point of view, there's things that I use, like shields.io has Open Collective. I use that all the time on my repository. So I want that as a service to keep going. So that's one of the ones that I donate to. But there's also so many of them. It's hard to stop giving. You know what I mean? You want to give to everyone, but you can't. So,
if only there was some kind of broad collective that you could give to, and that it shared money out based on.
So I've heard that thought process, but I don't know how how well it would get disseminated in terms of what percentage goes to what people. Is it GitHub stars, users, downloads? How do you say that this share of my $100 a month? How do I know that it's going to the people I want it to go to? It's there's no easy answer for this. There's really not.
We looked into some stuff with libraries and dependency graphs to try and be like, well, for you, here's everything like across all of the projects that you work on. Yeah. But that never really got off the ground before everything went a bit crazy.
Yeah.
Open Collective has a thing called Back Your Stack as well.
I've seen that
which
as
is
well.
Quite cool.
So I've joined that, and I've kind of gone through the process of saying what I use and that sort of stuff. So that one, I was aware of that one. Yeah. But
yes, I should probably go now as well. As
I should
it's rather late.
It's getting a little bit late, absolutely. And most of these guys in the chat room are ahead of us as well. So they're in like Sweden and Norway and various other places. So
no. Keeping them up late.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, again, thank you. I'll stop talking. Me was talking there. So thank you again for coming. And for those of you that are on the stream, next I will be doing a stream this Friday coming, and I don't know what that'll be, but there's something in this area to kind of do a little bit more work on the API and the site. And next week, no streams next week. So thank you all for coming and keeping us company this evening. It's been good fun. So I will go ahead and stop the stream and
great.
Say goodnight.
Thanks for having me, and Absolutely. I'll see you on Twitter.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So